Derek Hayes was 41 years old, and most people who met him only saw the quiet parts. They saw the man who arrived at the community development office before sunrise, unlocked the side entrance for the janitor when her hands were full, and stayed late helping small contractors understand paperwork that could make or break their businesses. They saw the used charcoal gray pickup he drove, the plain navy suits he rotated through the week, the lunch he packed in a glass container because buying food downtown every day felt wasteful. They saw patience and mistook it for weakness. They saw restraint and called it lack of ambition. Derek had learned not to correct people too quickly. There was a kind of peace in being underestimated, a silence that let a man hear what others revealed when they thought he had no power. 3 years earlier, Monica Ellison had called that silence embarrassing. Back then, she was still Monica Hayes, still standing in the kitchen of their rented townhouse with her arms folded beneath the soft yellow light over the sink, telling him she was tired of living small. Derek could still remember the hum of the refrigerator behind her, the rain ticking against the back window, the wedding photo on the wall slightly crooked because the nail had loosened and he had not fixed it yet. He had paid her certification fees, driven her to interviews, ironed her blouses when she was too tired to stand, and sat in the hallway during networking events because she said the room felt easier when she knew he was nearby. But by the end, all of that had become invisible. What remained, in Monica's version, was a husband who did not shine brightly enough beside the future she wanted. On Thursday evening, Derek came home to his apartment in West Midtown just after 6. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent and someone's fried onions from downstairs. He set his keys in the small ceramic bowl by the door, loosened his tie, and noticed the cream-colored envelope lying on the floor beneath the mail slot. It was too heavy to be a bill. Too elegant to be ordinary. His name was written across the front in black ink so neat it looked printed, but Derek knew the slant of the D before he touched it. Monica. Something felt wrong. He picked it up and stood there a moment, the apartment quiet around him, the last orange light of the day stretching across the hardwood. Inside was an invitation on thick ivory cardstock embossed with gold lettering. Monica Ellison Foundation Anniversary Gala. Saturday night. The Caldwell Grand Hotel. Cocktail attire. Derek read it once without moving. Then he saw the note tucked behind the invitation, folded once, written by hand. You should come. It might help you understand what success looks like. He did not blink for several seconds. The words were not loud, but they landed with the precision of a door closing. Derek could almost hear her voice in them, polished and amused, the voice she used when she wanted an audience to believe cruelty was sophistication. He set the card on the kitchen counter beside his unopened mail and watched the paper lie there beneath the pendant light. 3 years of distance disappeared faster than he expected. Not because he still wanted the life they had lost, but because the note reminded him how carefully Monica had rewritten it. In her story, she had escaped a man who could not rise. In Derek's memory, she had left before she ever understood what he had been building. He stayed silent. Outside, a car rolled slowly past the building, its headlights sliding across the blinds and vanishing. Derek removed his jacket, hung it on the back of a chair, and made coffee he did not drink. The mug sat cooling while he turned the invitation over, checked the return address, studied the guest access card, and noted the time printed at the bottom. 7:30. Grand Ballroom. Private donor reception to follow. That detail did not match. Monica had never invited him to anything after the divorce. Not birthdays. Not charity lunches. Not the award ceremony where she had thanked everyone who believed in my vision, while Derek watched a 30-second clip online and closed the laptop before the applause ended. This was not nostalgia. This was staging. Before we go deeper into what Derek discovered that night, tell us where you're watching from and do not forget to subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. He picked up his phone and scrolled to a message from Malcolm Reed, the only friend who knew enough of the old story to understand the shape of this new one. Derek photographed the invitation but did not send it yet. Instead, he opened the hotel website, found the gala listing, and read the sponsor names slowly. Monica's Foundation. Preston Vale Consulting. Several downtown firms. Then one line near the bottom stopped him cold. Venue coordination handled through Monroe Hospitality Group. Derek stared at that name until the screen dimmed in his hand. He tapped it awake again, and for the first time that evening, his expression changed. Not shock. Not anger. Recognition. Because Monica had chosen her stage without realizing whose lights she was standing under. Derek did not sleep much that night. He moved through the apartment the way a man moves through a room after hearing a noise he cannot place, not afraid, not hurried, just aware of everything. The invitation remained on the kitchen counter, its gold lettering catching the small pool of light from the stove hood. He washed the coffee mug he had never used, dried it, placed it back in the cabinet, and still found himself looking at the card again. Monica Ellison Foundation Anniversary Gala. The words looked expensive, polished, harmless to anyone who did not know the history behind them. Derek knew the history. He had lived in the unglamorous years before the gala photographs, before the foundation name, before the tailored interviews and charity boards and people calling Monica inspirational. He remembered the apartment on the east side with the window unit that rattled all summer. He remembered changing the oil in her car before dawn because she had an interview at 8 and the engine light had come on the night before. He remembered sitting at their small kitchen table with a calculator, moving money between bills so her certification course would be paid before the deadline. Monica had cried that night, not loudly, just enough for him to slide his hand over hers and tell her they would figure it out. They always had. That was the part no one saw. They saw Monica in a clean white blazer on a magazine website, smiling beside donors and polished glass walls. They did not see Derek eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch 3 weeks in a row because the grocery budget had gone toward her conference fee in Atlanta. They did not see him standing outside a hotel ballroom with her coat over his arm while she introduced herself to people who might open doors. They did not hear her whisper in the car afterward, breathless with hope, saying, "I think they liked me." He had believed in that hope. He had protected it. Maybe that was why her note felt less like an insult and more like an erasure. By morning, Derek was at his desk before anyone else arrived, the city still gray beyond the office windows. His workday began the same as always. He reviewed a grant application for a roofing contractor from Decatur, returned a call to a widow trying to keep her late husband's repair business licensed, and corrected a spreadsheet one of the interns had built with formulas that broke halfway down the page. His voice stayed even. His hand stayed steady. But his mind kept returning to the invitation folded inside his briefcase. Around 11, he opened an old storage folder on his laptop, one he had not touched in almost 2 years. It held tax records, scanned receipts, letters from lenders, copies of checks, and dated notes from the years when Monica's career was still a fragile thing they were building together. He was not searching for revenge. Not the kind people imagined. He was searching for the shape of the truth. There was the invoice for her first professional branding package, paid from his account. There was the loan statement he had refinanced so her credit would stay clean. There was the email from the nonprofit board thanking Monica for a proposal Derek had spent 2 weekends helping her outline at the dining room table. He read each item slowly, not with anger, but with the quiet ache of seeing proof that a life had happened differently than the story now being told about it. Near lunch, Malcolm Reed called. Derek let it ring twice before answering. Malcolm heard something in his silence before Derek said a word. What happened? Derek looked through the glass wall of his office at the hallway beyond it. People passed with folders and coffee cups, living inside an ordinary Thursday. Monica invited me to her gala, he said. Malcolm was quiet for a beat. That woman has not spoken your name in 3 years unless there was a room full of people to impress. Derek leaned back in his chair, eyes on the skyline beyond the window. She wrote a note. Of course she did. She wants me to see what success looks like. The line went still. Derek could hear Malcolm exhale through his nose, slow and controlled. Do not go there to get hurt, Derek. Derek lowered his gaze to the open folder on his screen. Receipts. Dates. Proof of years nobody clapped for. I am not going there for that. After the call ended, he sat alone for a long moment. Then he opened the gala listing again. Monica's name was everywhere, clean and glowing, but Derek noticed what he had missed the night before. Preston Vale Consulting was not just listed as a sponsor. It was featured beside Monica's foundation as a strategic partner. Derek stared at the name. He had heard it once before, not from Monica, but from a voicemail she had left him 6 months after the divorce, when she accidentally forgot to hang up before speaking to someone else in the room. Back then, he had deleted the message without saving it. Now he wished he had not. The detail did not prove anything. Not yet. But it changed the temperature of the room. Derek closed the laptop, took the invitation from his briefcase, and slipped it into a plain manila folder with the old receipts. For the first time since the envelope arrived, he understood that Monica had not simply invited him to witness her success. She had invited him to stand quietly inside a version of the past where he had been removed from every foundation stone. And somewhere behind that polished invitation, Preston Vale's name was already waiting. By Friday morning, Derek understood that Monica had not merely changed the story of their marriage. She had built a public identity on top of the rewritten version, brick by polished brick, until the lie looked respectable enough to be printed on gala invitations. He saw it in the articles first. He did not go looking for pain, but the internet had preserved it with perfect memory. Monica Ellison, founder and executive director, survivor of personal limitations, builder of her own table. The phrases appeared again and again beneath photographs of her standing in front of flower walls, ribbon cuttings, donor breakfasts, and hotel ballrooms. In one interview, she described the early years of her career as a season when she had been surrounded by people who did not believe in her vision. Derek read that sentence twice. He remembered those early years differently. He remembered carrying boxes into borrowed conference rooms because the foundation she dreamed about could not yet afford staff. He remembered finding a used printer on Facebook Marketplace and driving 40 minutes to pick it up because Monica had a proposal due Monday. He remembered testing the microphone at her first community panel while she stood in the restroom practicing her opening remarks because her hands had been shaking too badly to hold the paper. None of that was in the article. Of course it was not. There was no room for the man who had held the ladder once someone wanted to pretend she had climbed alone. He closed the browser, but the feeling stayed with him, low and steady beneath his ribs. Not heartbreak. That had burned out long ago. This was something quieter. The feeling of watching someone sell a version of your life where your kindness had been edited into weakness. At lunch, Derek left the office and walked the 4 blocks to a small coffee shop near Peachtree Street where the windows faced the traffic. He ordered black coffee and sat in the corner booth with his back to the wall, the way he always did when he needed to think. Outside, the city moved under a hard white sun, delivery trucks stopping at curbs, office workers crossing with phones in their hands, horns rising and fading between the glass towers. His phone rested on the table beside the manila folder. He opened another article. This one had photographs from last year's fundraiser. Monica stood beside Preston Vale under blue event lighting, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back in the posed, careful way of a man who wanted the camera to understand his importance without having to say it. Derek studied the image without letting his face change. He did not know what Preston was to her. Not officially. He only knew the name had appeared beside hers too often to be accidental. Strategic partner. Advisory chair. Lead sponsor. Friend of the foundation. Words that sounded clean until they repeated too many times. The old voicemail returned to him then, sharper than it had in years. Monica's voice on his phone 6 months after the divorce, asking about a tax document she claimed she needed. Then the muffled sound of the phone lowering, fabric brushing the microphone, her voice shifting away from him before the line went dead. Not enough words to accuse anyone of anything. Just a man's laugh in the background and Monica saying, "Preston, wait." Back then, Derek had been too tired to carry one more question. He had deleted it and gone back to work. Now, sitting in the coffee shop with the gala invitation inside the folder, he wished he had listened longer. Still, he would not build conclusions out of shadows. That was not how he lived. He believed in what could be documented, dated, placed in order, and read back without emotion. So he began doing what he had always done. He built a timeline. On a yellow legal pad, he wrote the date of the divorce filing, the date Monica launched her foundation, the date Preston Vale Consulting first appeared in public materials, and the dates of articles where she spoke about outgrowing limitations. The pattern did not tell the whole story. But it told enough to make his hand pause over the paper. Preston's name had entered the public record less than 3 months after the divorce was final. Derek looked out the window and watched a black SUV idle at the curb while a driver in a dark suit opened the rear door for someone he could not see. For a moment, he thought about Celeste Monroe, not as a secret, not as a weapon, but as the first person after Monica who had asked him what he was building before asking what he owned. He did not call her. Not yet. This was still his history to understand. When he returned to the office, there was an email waiting from the gala registration system confirming his attendance. Derek stared at it, confused, because he had not responded to the invitation. Then he saw the note added under guest classification, a small administrative line that must have been entered by someone on Monica's side. Former spouse, general admission, no +1. Derek sat very still. The room around him seemed to narrow, the hum of the office lights growing louder. No +1. Monica had not just invited him. She had arranged the room so he would arrive alone. Saturday arrived with a pale, polished kind of sunlight that made the city look cleaner than it really was. Derek spent the morning the way he spent most Saturdays, not dramatically, not like a man preparing for a confrontation, but like a man refusing to let someone else take ownership of his peace. He washed a load of shirts, watered the basil plant on his kitchen windowsill, paid 2 bills, and changed the battery in the hallway smoke detector after it gave one small warning chirp. Ordinary things steadied him. They reminded him that a life was not defined by the rooms where people applauded, but by what a person continued to do when no one was watching. Still, the invitation sat on the counter like an object with a pulse. By noon, Derek had opened the manila folder again. The gala confirmation email was printed and clipped beside the invitation. The words no +1 were circled once in black ink. He had not circled them in anger. He had circled them because details mattered, and that one told him more than Monica probably understood. She wanted him alone. She wanted the visual clean. Ex-husband enters by himself. Former life stands beneath new chandeliers. Audience watches him understand the distance between who she had become and who she claimed he had failed to be. Derek could see the shape of it now. Monica had always understood rooms. Even before she had money, she understood where to stand for photographs, whom to greet first, when to laugh softly, and how to make a story sound generous while keeping herself at the center of it. That had been one of the first things he admired about her. She could walk into a crowded space with $20 in her bank account and make people believe she belonged there. The difference was that, back then, Derek had believed belonging was something they were building together. He dressed slowly just after 5. A charcoal suit, white shirt, dark tie. Nothing flashy. Nothing that begged to be noticed. In the mirror above his dresser, he adjusted his cuffs and saw the faint tiredness beneath his eyes. He looked like the man Monica expected to underestimate. That was useful. His phone buzzed once on the dresser. Malcolm had sent one message. Keep your head clear. Derek read it, locked the screen, and slipped the phone into his pocket. The Caldwell Grand Hotel rose 42 stories above downtown Atlanta, a silver and limestone tower with warm light spilling from the lobby windows. Derek parked 2 blocks away instead of using valet. Not because he could not afford it, but because walking gave him time to observe. Evening air moved between the buildings, carrying the smell of rain on concrete, exhaust, perfume, and restaurant smoke. Ahead, black cars and luxury sport utility vehicles curved into the hotel driveway, stopping beneath a canopy where attendants in dark coats opened doors for women in satin gowns and men in tailored tuxedos. Cameras flashed near the entrance. Not press cameras, exactly, but the kind hired for events that wanted to look important later. Derek paused across the street and watched. The gala was not just a fundraiser. It was theater. Through the glass doors, he could see the marble lobby, the polished floor reflecting gold light, the tall floral arrangements placed where guests would have to pass them. A banner bearing Monica's foundation logo stood beside a step-and-repeat wall, and there she was, not close enough for him to hear but close enough for him to recognize the posture. Monica Ellison stood beneath the chandelier in a champagne-colored gown, smiling as if the room had been built around her. Beside her, Preston Vale leaned toward a donor, one hand in his pocket, an expensive watch catching the light each time he moved. Derek did not know what Preston was saying. He could only see how comfortably he occupied the space. Too comfortably. As Derek crossed at the light, a memory moved through him without permission. Monica years ago, sitting in their old car outside a rented banquet hall, gripping his hand because she was afraid no one inside would take her seriously. He had told her, "Walk in like the room already has your name on it." She had laughed then, nervous and grateful, and said she would borrow his confidence until she grew her own. Now the room did have her name on it. And Derek was beginning to understand that she had invited him there so everyone could see she no longer needed the man who had taught her how to enter. Preston Vale looked exactly like the kind of man Monica would want people to notice beside her. Derek saw that before he reached the registration table. Preston was tall, clean-shaven, wrapped in a black tuxedo that fit too perfectly to be rented, with silver cuff links, polished shoes, and the kind of smile that never seemed to touch anything beneath the surface. He stood with one hand resting near Monica's lower back, not possessive enough to be obvious, but close enough to be understood by anyone watching. Every few minutes, he leaned toward her and said something that made her laugh lightly, her hand rising to touch his sleeve as if the movement had been practiced. Derek slowed just enough to take it in. Not because it hurt the way it once might have, but because the picture was so carefully arranged. Monica in champagne silk under the hotel lights. Preston beside her like a living certificate of arrival. Behind them, the foundation logo repeated across the wall in gold and cream, each photograph turning the moment into evidence. That was what Monica had always wanted from rooms like this. Evidence that she had won. The woman at the registration table looked up as Derek approached. She was young, probably a volunteer, with a headset in one ear and a tablet in her hands. "Name, please?" she asked. "Derek Hayes." Her finger moved down the screen. She paused for half a second, not long, but long enough for Derek to notice. Then her face shifted into the careful smile people use when they have been told something before meeting you. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. General admission." She handed him a small black card with no ribbon, no donor badge, no table number printed in gold like the cards he saw being handed to other guests. Just his name and a small code in the corner. "The main reception is through the ballroom doors." Derek accepted it without comment. The detail did not surprise him. It confirmed the architecture. Monica had placed him where he could be seen but not honored, included but not welcomed, present but clearly beneath the people she wanted to impress. He slipped the card into his jacket pocket and stepped into the lobby's warm noise. Glasses chimed. Soft jazz moved through the air. Expensive perfume drifted above the marble floor. Conversations rose and folded into one another beneath the chandelier, full of foundation grants, corporate boards, real estate developments, and names Derek recognized from donor lists he had seen online. He moved slowly, not hiding, not searching for anyone, simply letting the room reveal itself. A man near the bar glanced at him, looked away, then looked back with the faint uncertainty of someone trying to place a face from an old story. A woman in emerald satin whispered something to her companion after reading Derek's badge. He heard only 3 words as he passed. That is him. He kept walking. Near the far end of the lobby, Preston lifted his head and saw him. The recognition came quickly, followed by something polished and amused. Preston said something to Monica. Derek could not hear it, but he saw Monica's shoulders shift before she turned. Her smile widened when she found him across the room. It was not warmth. It was presentation. She touched Preston's arm, then crossed the marble floor toward Derek with the graceful confidence of someone walking toward a microphone she already knew was on. "Derek," she said, loud enough for the nearest cluster of guests to hear. "You actually came." Her eyes traveled over his plain charcoal suit, his dark tie, his shoes, the empty space beside him. "I am glad. I was worried the valet prices might scare you off." A small ripple of laughter moved through the people behind her. Not everyone laughed, but enough did. Enough for the moment to do what she had designed it to do. Derek felt the old version of himself stir somewhere deep, the man who once would have tried to explain, soften, correct, protect her from looking cruel. He let that man remain silent. Monica tilted her head, still smiling. "Come on," she said, turning slightly so the room could follow. "There are a few people I want you to meet." Across the lobby, Preston waited with his glass raised just below his mouth, watching Derek approach as if he were watching a footnote walk into the main text. Derek adjusted his cuff once, slowly, and followed Monica into the light. Derek followed Monica across the marble lobby and into the edge of the grand ballroom, where the light changed from warm gold to something softer and more deliberate. The room had been designed to flatter everyone inside it. Tall arrangements of white orchids stood in glass vases near the entrance. Round tables were dressed in ivory linen, each one set with folded napkins, polished silverware, and place cards printed in metallic ink. Above it all, a chandelier spread light across the ceiling like frozen rain. The city glowed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, 20 stories down, all red taillights and glass towers and expensive distance. Derek took in every detail without turning his head too much. That was habit. Observe first. React later, if reaction was necessary at all. Monica slowed beside a table near the center of the room, not one of the donor tables near the front and not one of the private sponsor tables near the windows, but close enough to the main aisle that anyone important could see who she had brought in. Derek noticed that too. His name was not on any of the place cards. There was no seat waiting for him. Monica had not made a mistake. She had made a point. "Everyone," Monica said, her voice bright and smooth, "this is Derek Hayes." 4 faces turned toward him. A woman in a silver dress with a diamond bracelet. A man with a red pocket square and a drink already half finished. Another couple Derek vaguely remembered from one of Monica's old networking events years ago, though neither of them acted as if they remembered him. Monica smiled as if she were introducing a charming inconvenience from a chapter she had outgrown. "Derek was part of my life before all of this," she said, lifting one hand to indicate the ballroom, the flowers, the donors, the lights, the room that seemed to breathe around her. "Back when things were much simpler." The woman in silver made a soft sound that was almost sympathetic. The man with the red pocket square looked at Derek's suit, then at his shoes, then back to his face with a polite expression that did not quite hide the calculation behind it. Derek had seen that look before. Men used it in conference rooms when they wanted to know whether another man mattered. Women used it at fundraisers when deciding whether someone was a guest, staff, or a mistake. Monica touched his arm lightly, the way someone might touch an old piece of furniture while explaining where it used to sit. "Derek was always very practical," she continued. "He kept me grounded. Sometimes maybe a little too grounded." Another small laugh moved around the group. Derek let it pass over him. He looked at the table instead. The floral centerpiece was slightly too tall, forcing guests to lean sideways to see one another. The water glasses had already been filled. One place card read Preston Vale, strategic partner. Another read Monica Ellison, founder. Derek's name was nowhere. That absence settled something in him. He had not been invited as a guest. He had been placed as contrast. Preston arrived a moment later, moving into the circle with a practiced ease that made space bend around him. "Derek," he said, offering his hand. His grip was firm, his smile clean. "Monica has told me a lot about you." Derek shook his hand once. "Has she?" Preston's smile widened just enough. Enough to appreciate the journey. The words were harmless on the surface, but Derek heard the shape beneath them. Journey meant distance. Journey meant Monica had moved upward and he had remained behind. Monica looked pleased, as if Preston had delivered the line exactly where she wanted it. "Preston has been instrumental this year," she said. "His firm helped us structure the donor expansion." Derek nodded. "That is good work." "It is," Preston said. "Of course, rooms like this require a certain kind of vision." Derek looked past him for 1 second toward the windows, where the city lights reflected in the glass and turned the ballroom into a double image of itself. What people showed. What stood behind it. Something felt wrong, not because the insult was unexpected, but because Preston was performing too hard. Men who truly belonged rarely needed to remind anyone that they did. Monica guided the conversation forward, telling a polished story about late nights, sacrifice, and building from nothing. Derek listened as if hearing a stranger describe a house he had once framed with his own hands. She mentioned struggle but not who paid the bills during it. She mentioned courage but not who sat beside her when she doubted herself. She mentioned vision but not who helped her put the first proposal into words. Each omission was clean. Surgical. By the time a server passed with champagne, Derek understood the rhythm of the evening. Monica would not insult him all at once. She would let the room do it slowly. She would let the contrast speak. Derek accepted a glass he did not drink and stood beneath the chandelier while the woman he had once helped build introduced him as the proof of everything she believed she had escaped. Monica waited until the ballroom had grown louder before she tightened the circle around Derek. It happened slowly, almost elegantly, the way she did everything when there were witnesses. First, she drew him toward a group near the Champagne Tower where 3 donors and 2 board members were laughing about a vacation home on Lake Oconee. Then she touched his elbow and said, "You remember Derek, do you not? He was around during the early days." Around. The word landed softly enough that anyone could pretend not to hear what it removed. Derek stood with the untouched champagne glass in his hand and watched the faces adjust. A few people gave him quick smiles. One man nodded the way executives nod at elevator attendants, polite but already looking past him. Monica kept going. "He used to fix everything back then. The sink, the car, my old printer. I swear, if ambition could be measured in toolbox skills, Derek would have been unstoppable." A laugh moved through the group, warmer this time, encouraged by her tone. Derek felt the sound arrive and pass. He did not look down. He did not defend himself. He remembered that printer clearly. He had driven 40 minutes to buy it used because Monica had a proposal due, and when it jammed at midnight, she had cried at the kitchen table while he took the back panel apart with a butter knife and patience. The proposal had helped her get her first serious meeting. Now the story had been trimmed until only the punchline remained. Preston stood beside Monica with his glass held at chest level, smiling as if he admired her wit. "Practical men have their place," he said. "Every vision needs someone to handle the small things." Derek turned his eyes to him. Preston's expression did not change, but something flickered behind it, a quick test to see if the line had cut. Derek gave him nothing. That seemed to bother Preston more than any answer would have. Monica lifted her glass. "Honestly, I am grateful for every season," she said, and the people around her softened, ready for inspiration. "Some people teach us what we do not want in life. Some seasons teach us what we are meant to outgrow." The room around the Champagne Tower quieted just enough for the words to carry. A woman near Derek lowered her eyes to hide a smile. Someone behind him gave a small, uncomfortable laugh. Derek knew what Monica was doing. She had turned cruelty into testimony. She had wrapped humiliation in the language of growth so the room could applaud without feeling unkind. He looked at her face while the light from the chandelier moved across her earrings. She looked beautiful, composed, victorious in the way a person looks victorious when no one has asked for the receipts. Then the applause came. Not thunderous, not formal, just enough hands coming together to make the moment real. Derek stood in the center of it with the same calm face he had carried into the hotel. Inside, memory opened one door after another. Monica in their old living room practicing Grant language out loud. Monica calling him from a parking lot because she had spilled coffee on her blouse and did not want to walk into an interview looking defeated. Monica asleep at the kitchen table while he finished formatting the donor packet she would later present as her breakthrough. He had never minded being invisible when invisibility meant support. He minded being turned into a warning label. Still, he did not raise his voice. He did not correct her in front of the donors. He did not tell them that the toolbox had kept her first office running, that the old car had carried her to every opportunity, that the man she painted as small had once made himself smaller so she could walk into rooms bigger than both of them. He only set the champagne glass on the nearest table, untouched. The tiny sound of glass touching linen felt louder to him than the applause. Monica noticed. Her smile held, but her eyes sharpened. "No toast?" she asked, light enough for others to hear. Derek looked at her, then at Preston, then at the watching faces around them. "I am listening," he said. That was all. For half a second, the circle lost its rhythm. Monica blinked once. Preston's smile tightened. The woman who had hidden her smile looked suddenly interested in the floor. Derek could feel the room recalculating, not because he had won anything, not yet, but because his silence had stopped looking like embarrassment. It had started looking like record-keeping. Then, beyond Monica's shoulder, near the ballroom entrance, Derek saw the hotel manager from the lobby speak into her headset and glance directly at him. Her expression changed when their eyes met. Respectful. Careful. Almost relieved. She began walking toward him through the crowd, and Derek knew the evening had just shifted by one small, dangerous degree. The hotel manager moved through the crowd with the kind of controlled speed that did not draw attention unless a person knew how to watch for it. Derek watched. Her black suit was tailored, her hair pulled back neatly, her name badge catching the chandelier light as she passed between donors with practiced apologies and quiet nods. Angela Brooks. He had seen the name earlier on the hotel website under event operations, though he had not expected her to recognize him in the middle of a ballroom where, according to Monica's guest list, he was supposed to be little more than general admission. Monica saw Derek looking past her and turned slightly, still wearing the smile she used when she believed the room belonged to her. Preston followed her gaze. His expression stayed polite, but Derek noticed the small change in his jaw when Angela came closer. People like Preston understood service hierarchies. They knew when an employee approached to solve a problem and when an employee approached someone important. Angela stopped beside Derek, not Monica, not Preston. She angled her body just enough to speak to him without making a scene, but not enough to hide the respect in her posture. "Mr. Hayes," she said softly, "I apologize for the interruption." The words were simple. The effect was not. Monica's smile froze at the edges. The people nearest them glanced from Angela to Derek, suddenly uncertain whether they had misread the room. Derek kept his face calm. "It is all right." Angela lowered her voice, but the ballroom had entered that strange pocket of quiet that forms when a group senses information moving just beyond its reach. "Mrs. Monroe's security team has arrived downstairs. They are requesting access through the private elevator. Would you like us to clear the corridor now, or should we hold them in the West Lounge until you are ready?" Derek did not answer immediately. Not because he was surprised, but because he could feel every person around him trying not to react. The name had landed in a circle like a dropped glass that had not yet shattered. Mrs. Monroe. Security team. Private elevator. 3 details, each one small on its own, together forming a shape Monica had not prepared for. Derek saw her eyes narrow for a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, but not completely. "I am sorry," Monica said with a light laugh that did not quite reach the room. "There must be some confusion. Derek is here as my guest." Angela turned to her with the polished courtesy of a woman trained never to embarrass a client unless the truth required it. "Of course, Miss Ellison." She looked back at Derek. "Mr. Hayes is also listed under the executive arrival protocol." Preston's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Derek saw it. So did Monica. "Executive arrival protocol?" Preston asked, the words smooth but thinner than before. Angela did not look at him until the question forced her to. "Yes, sir." She did not explain further. That was the elegant cruelty of professionalism. It gave nothing away, but it confirmed everything that mattered. Derek glanced toward the ballroom entrance. 2 hotel security staff stood near the doors now, not tense, not dramatic, simply positioned with quiet purpose. A 3rd employee spoke into a headset beside the floral arch. No one blocked the celebration. No one raised a voice. But the machinery of the hotel had shifted around Derek in a way the room could feel. Monica stepped closer, lowering her voice as if privacy could still be recovered. "Derek, what is this?" He looked at her then. There were years in that look, but no accusation. Only the calm of a man who had listened long enough. "It sounds like a hotel matter," he said. Preston gave a short laugh, too quick to be natural. "You know people at the hotel now?" Derek turned his eyes to him. "I know how to read a room." The sentence was quiet, but it settled heavily. Angela waited beside him, respectful and still. Around them, the group that had laughed minutes earlier no longer seemed sure where to put their hands, their eyes, or their loyalty. The woman in silver shifted her bracelet, suddenly fascinated by the diamonds. The man with the red pocket square looked toward the sponsor tables, recalculating something Derek could almost see moving behind his face. Monica's gaze flicked once toward the entrance, then back to Derek, and for the first time that night, he saw something in her expression that did not belong under the chandelier. Uncertainty. Angela leaned closer, voice low enough now that only Derek could hear clearly. "There is one more thing, sir. Mrs. Monroe asked that you be informed before she enters the ballroom. She said you would understand why." Derek held her gaze for one measured breath. Then he looked past Monica, past Preston, toward the private elevator corridor glowing at the far end of the lobby. The doors were still closed. But everyone near Derek had begun to feel the weight of whoever was behind them. The private elevator doors did not open right away. That was what made the moment stretch. Derek stood near the edge of the ballroom with Angela Brooks at his side, Monica in front of him, Preston just behind her, and a loose circle of guests pretending not to stare while staring at everything. The music kept playing, soft jazz over the speakers, but it seemed farther away now, as if the room had been placed behind glass. Derek could hear smaller sounds instead. Ice shifting in a tumbler. A woman clearing her throat. The faint crackle of Angela's headset. Monica's bracelet tapping once against her champagne flute because her hand had moved too quickly and she had not meant for anyone to notice. Derek noticed. He noticed everything. At the far end of the lobby, beyond the floral arch and the step-and-repeat wall, one hotel security officer adjusted his position beside the private corridor. Another employee stepped back from the elevator with the kind of posture that said instruction had become action. No one ran. No one looked alarmed. That was what gave the scene its weight. Panic was loud. Power rarely needed to be. Then the elevator gave a soft chime. Monica turned her head before she could stop herself. Preston turned too. Several guests followed, their conversations thinning into silence one by one. Derek kept his gaze steady on the polished metal doors as they parted. Two security professionals stepped out first, both in dark suits, both calm, both scanning the room without making a show of it. Behind them came a woman Derek knew with the painful clarity of a life divided into before and after. Celeste Monroe entered the hotel light as if she had not come to impress anyone and therefore impressed everyone. She wore a black evening dress with clean lines, no glitter, no unnecessary drama, just fabric that moved with quiet certainty. Her hair was drawn back at the nape of her neck. Small diamond earrings caught the chandelier glow when she turned. In one hand she carried a dark clutch. In the other, her phone rested face down against her palm, ignored for the moment, because Celeste never gave a room the privilege of watching her hurry. Derek felt something in his chest ease, a small loosening he had not realized he needed. He had seen Celeste in boardrooms, community meetings, airport lounges, construction sites, and Sunday morning kitchens with coffee cooling beside her laptop. She looked different in each place and exactly the same underneath. Composed. Present. Untouchable in a way that had nothing to do with arrogance. She did not search the room the way insecure people search for approval. She simply took in what was there, understood it, and moved through it. A whisper passed behind Derek's left shoulder. "That is Celeste Monroe." Another voice, lower, sharper. "Monroe Capital." Someone else said, barely audible, "She owns half the skyline." Derek did not look toward the voices. He watched Monica instead. Monica's expression had changed by degrees, each one small enough to deny if named too quickly. First recognition, because even people outside real estate knew Celeste's face from magazine covers and acquisition headlines. Then confusion, because recognition did not explain proximity. Then the effortful return of composure, because Monica had survived too many rooms by refusing to let surprise remain visible. Preston had less discipline. His smile disappeared before he rebuilt it. Derek saw his eyes move from Celeste to Angela Brooks, then to the hotel staff by the corridor, then back to Celeste's security. A man recalculating. A man reading risk where he had expected theater. Celeste paused just beyond the elevator corridor while one of her assistants stepped close and said something Derek could not hear. She listened, nodded once, then looked across the lobby. Her eyes found Derek immediately. Not Monica. Not Preston. Not the donor wall or the cameras or the chandelier. Derek. For a moment, the ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Derek saw Celeste take in the circle around him, the untouched champagne glass on the table, Monica's bright gown, Preston's fixed smile, the guests frozen in their half-curious, half-guilty positions. Celeste's face did not harden. It did not need to. Her stillness sharpened enough. Angela stepped slightly aside, clearing the path. Derek felt Monica's gaze flick toward him, searching his face for an explanation he did not owe her. He gave none. Celeste began walking toward them across the marble, her heels making a soft, measured sound beneath the fading music. With every step, the room adjusted. Conversation stopped. Shoulders turned. People who had laughed earlier now stood straighter without knowing why. Derek remained where he was, calm, hands relaxed at his sides. He had not brought Celeste there as a weapon. But as she crossed into the ballroom light and every person around Monica began to understand that the evening had not gone according to her design, Derek knew the stage had changed owners. Celeste crossed the last stretch of marble without speeding up, and Derek realized that every step she took was changing the meaning of everything around him. The chandelier, the donor wall, the champagne tower, the cameras, the polished shoes and expensive watches, all of it had been arranged to make Monica look untouchable. But Celeste did not need the room arranged for her. The room rearranged itself because she had entered it. Derek watched her come closer and felt the old pressure in his chest loosen into something steadier. Not triumph. Not revenge. Something quieter than that. Recognition. For most of the night, Monica had looked at him as if he were a piece of evidence from a life she had overcome. Celeste looked at him as if he were the only person in the ballroom who mattered. That difference moved through the room before anyone said a word. Monica's smile returned, but it sat wrong on her face now, too bright, too fast, like a lamp switched on in daylight. Preston shifted half a step forward, trying to place himself where introductions would naturally flow through him. Derek noticed the movement. Celeste noticed it too. Her eyes touched Preston for one brief second, not dismissive, not impressed, simply registering him as part of the furniture of the situation. Then she looked back at Derek. "I am sorry, love," she said, her voice low enough to sound private and clear enough to be heard by everyone close enough to matter. The board meeting ran late. The words settled over the circle with a silence so complete Derek could hear the ice melting in a nearby glass. Love. Board meeting. The easy intimacy of it. The effortless explanation. Derek saw Monica absorb the sentence one piece at a time. First the apology, because it belonged to a relationship. Then the word love, because it named what Monica had not imagined. Then the way Celeste stopped beside him, close enough that her shoulder nearly touched his arm, not performing possession, simply standing where she belonged. Derek turned slightly toward her. "You made it," he said. Celeste's expression softened in a way only he would have noticed. "I told you I would." That small exchange did more damage to Monica's performance than any speech could have. It was too natural to be staged. Too calm to be a stunt. Around them, the guests began to understand that the man they had been invited to pity had not arrived alone in the way Monica believed. Monica's fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne flute. Derek saw the glass tilt, then steady. She took one careful breath. "Celeste Monroe," she said, shaping the name as if saying it correctly might give her back control. "What an honor. I had no idea you were attending tonight." Celeste turned to her then. The movement was graceful, but Derek felt the temperature of the circle change. "You must be Monica Ellison." Monica's smile held. "Yes. I am the host." Celeste glanced once at the foundation banner behind her, then back. "And Derek's ex-wife." No one moved. The sentence was not sharp. It did not need to be. It placed Monica exactly where Monica had spent the evening trying to place Derek, inside a smaller definition. Derek watched Monica's face as the room heard it. Ex-wife. Not founder. Not host. Not success story. Ex-wife. Preston cleared his throat softly, stepping in with a professional smile. "Preston Vale," he said. "Strategic partner for the foundation. I have followed your work for years." He offered his hand. Celeste looked at it for a moment before accepting, a pause so brief it could have been politeness and so precise it could not be missed. "Mr. Vale," she said. Derek saw Preston's confidence flicker at the sound of his name in her mouth. Not because she sounded angry. Because she sounded informed. "Monroe Capital has an interesting relationship with firms that call themselves strategic partners," she added. "We tend to look closely at structure." Preston withdrew his hand a fraction too quickly. Monica laughed, light and brittle. "Well, tonight is really about community impact." Celeste looked at Derek again, and something in her face told him she had heard enough already, maybe from Angela, maybe from the room itself, maybe from the way Derek stood with an untouched glass and no seat assigned to him. But she did not ask him to explain. She knew better than to make him relive a humiliation for public clarity. Instead, she slid her hand gently through his arm and faced the circle with composed warmth. "Then I hope everyone here has been treating my husband with the respect community is supposed to stand for." The word husband moved through the ballroom like a match dropped into still air. Derek did not look away from Monica. Her smile finally broke, not fully, not dramatically, but enough. Enough for him to know she understood. The joke she had prepared had just found its audience. And it was no longer on him. Nathaniel Cross entered so quietly that Derek almost missed him at first. The ballroom was still adjusting to Celeste's last word, husband, that single word now hanging over Monica's carefully arranged evening like a crack in polished glass. Guests who had been laughing 15 minutes earlier stood with their mouths closed, hands wrapped around champagne flutes, eyes moving from Derek to Celeste to Monica and then back again. The music continued, but the room no longer belonged to it. Derek felt Celeste's hand rest lightly on his arm, not pulling him forward, not holding him back, just reminding him that he was not standing in that circle alone. Across from them, Monica was trying to rebuild her face into something gracious. Preston was trying to do the same thing and doing it worse. His eyes kept moving toward the entrance, toward Angela Brooks, toward the security staff, toward anything that might explain how quickly the floor beneath him had changed. Then Derek saw the older man in the charcoal overcoat approach from the private corridor with a leather document case in one hand. Nathaniel Cross had silver at his temples, wire-frame glasses, and the quiet, deliberate expression of a man who had spent decades entering rooms where words cost money. Derek had met him twice, once in Celeste's office and once over dinner when a real estate acquisition had run late and Celeste insisted Derek stay. Nathaniel was not dramatic. That was what made him effective. He stopped beside Celeste and nodded to Derek first. "Mr. Hayes." Derek returned the nod. "Nathaniel." Preston's face changed at the name. Not much, but Derek saw it. A tightening around the eyes. A slight lift of the chin. Recognition with a thin edge of concern. Celeste noticed too, though she did not turn toward Preston right away. Nathaniel opened the document case and removed a slim folder, not a stack, not enough to make a spectacle, just one folder with a Monroe Hospitality seal embossed in dark blue on the corner. Monica glanced at it, then at Derek, then at Celeste. "Is there a problem with the event?" she asked, trying to sound amused. "Because if there is, I am sure hotel management can address it after the program." Angela Brooks, standing 2 steps behind Derek, kept her expression neutral. Nathaniel looked at Monica with professional calm. "There is no problem with the event, Miss Ellison. The event agreement remains valid." Monica's shoulders eased by less than an inch. Derek saw it. "Then I do not understand why legal counsel is needed in the middle of my fundraiser." Celeste answered before Nathaniel could. "He is not here for your fundraiser." She said it gently, which somehow made it heavier. Nathaniel shifted his attention to Preston. "Mr. Vale, your firm submitted a capital access proposal to Monroe Capital 6 weeks ago through a subsidiary entity." Preston's smile returned too quickly. "We speak with a lot of investors, Mr. Cross. I am sure you understand." "I do," Nathaniel said. "That is why structure matters." Derek watched Preston's hand close slightly around his glass. No one else may have noticed, but Derek did. The same hand that had floated with confidence earlier now looked careful, almost still. Nathaniel continued, his voice quiet enough to avoid sounding like an announcement and clear enough that everyone in the circle heard it anyway. "Your proposal listed this foundation partnership as a key credibility asset. It also represented that your firm had secured exclusive advisory rights for the next phase of donor expansion." Monica looked at Preston. Just once. It was quick, but Derek caught it. That was the first time all night her confidence had turned outward for answers instead of inward for control. Preston gave a soft laugh. "That sounds like standard language. Nothing unusual." Celeste's eyes stayed on him. Standard language becomes unusual when it borrows credibility from people who do not know how their names are being used. The room seemed to pull tighter around the sentence. Derek did not know the full contents of the folder. Celeste had not told him everything before arriving, and he respected that. What he knew was what he could see: Nathaniel's steady hands, Preston's careful breathing, Monica's sudden stillness, Angela's respectful silence, and the way several guests near the circle had begun lowering their phones, not recording, just holding them like they had forgotten why they had taken them out. Then Nathaniel added one more detail, and it changed the air again. For clarity, Monroe Hospitality finalized acquisition of the Caldwell Grand Hotel portfolio on Monday morning. This property is now under Mrs. Monroe's ownership group. Derek felt Monica's hand, somewhere across the space between them, stop moving entirely. She looked up at the chandelier as if seeing it for the first time. Derek followed her gaze. The lights, the marble, the ballroom, the stage, the entire room she had chosen for his humiliation had not been hers to command in the way she believed. It had already belonged to Celeste before Derek ever walked through the door. For several seconds, Monica did not speak. Derek watched her look from the chandelier to the marble floor, from Angela Brooks to Nathaniel Cross, from Celeste to Preston, as if the room had become a document written in a language she had never expected to read. The Caldwell Grand had been her chosen stage, the place where she planned to stand beneath borrowed elegance and make Derek feel like a man who had missed his chance at a better life. Now every polished surface reflected something else. The stage had been hers only because Celeste had allowed the event to continue. The lights had stayed on because no one with real power had chosen to turn them off. Derek saw the moment Monica understood that, and he almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then her face changed. Not fully. Monica was too practiced for that. But the warmth she had denied him all night suddenly returned, fast and artificial, spreading across her expression like makeup applied over a bruise. "Derek," she said softly, and the sound of his name in that voice took him backward for half a second, not to love, but to the memory of being useful. She stepped closer, lowering her champagne flute. "This has clearly become awkward, and I hate that. You know me. I would never want you to feel unwelcome." Derek looked at her in silence. 10 minutes earlier, she had let the room laugh at valet prices. 15 minutes earlier, she had toasted to outgrowing him. Now she was speaking as if the evening had simply drifted into misunderstanding by accident. The shift was so clean it almost impressed him. Preston moved beside her, smoothing the front of his tuxedo with 2 fingers. "I think everyone is taking business matters a little too seriously," he said, aiming the sentence at Celeste but careful not to meet her eyes for too long. "Tonight is about community, like Monica said. No need for anyone to turn this into something personal." Derek heard the word personal and felt the smallest tightening in his chest. That was what people said after they made another person's dignity public property. It was only personal when the person they embarrassed stopped accepting the role. Celeste did not answer Preston right away. She looked at Derek first, giving him space with nothing more than her silence. That mattered to him. She did not take over the moment, did not speak for him, did not make his humiliation into her performance. She simply stood beside him as if the truth could stand on its own if given enough room. Monica noticed that too. Her eyes flicked between them, and Derek saw calculation trying to become charm. "Derek, honey," she said. "Honey." The word landed wrong. Around them, several guests shifted. Even the woman in silver looked uncomfortable now. Derek had not heard Monica call him that since the last month of their marriage, when the word had already begun sounding like habit instead of tenderness. He saw Celeste's expression remain calm, but her hand on his arm grew still. "You could have told me," Monica continued, a small laugh trembling at the edge of her voice. "About Celeste. About your life. I mean, look at you. You always were full of surprises." Derek studied her. The woman in front of him was not seeing him. She was seeing proximity. Access. Correction. A way out of the story she had created too loudly in front of too many witnesses. Nathaniel Cross closed the folder without a sound and held it at his side. Angela Brooks waited with the patience of someone who knew the hotel would remember this night through staff whispers long after the flowers were cleared. Preston checked the room again, and Derek understood that Preston was no longer measuring Derek's worth. He was measuring damage. Celeste finally turned her attention to Monica. Her voice was even, almost gentle. A woman who needs an audience to humiliate a good man usually ends up revealing herself instead. No one clapped. No one laughed. The sentence did not ask for a reaction. It simply entered the room and stayed there. Monica's smile faded by degrees. Derek could see the anger underneath it, and beneath that, something more fragile. Not regret. Not yet. Fear of being seen. He knew that difference now. Monica reached toward him, not touching, but close enough to suggest familiarity for the watching guests. "Derek, can we talk privately?" she asked. "Please. Just for a minute." He looked at her hand, then at the crowd behind her, the people who had watched him be reduced to a joke and now watched to see what kind of man he would become in return. For a moment, the ballroom waited with him. Derek thought of the old printer, the unpaid bills, the hallways outside her first events, the years he had carried quietly while she learned to shine. Then he looked back at Monica and understood something with complete clarity. She did not want privacy because she owed him respect. She wanted privacy because public truth had become inconvenient. Derek looked at Monica's outstretched hand and let the silence answer before his voice did. In another life, he would have stepped away with her. He would have protected her from embarrassment, even when she had created it. He would have carried the hard part somewhere private so the room could keep thinking well of her. That had been the old contract between them, never written, never spoken, but always paid by him. Tonight, he finally let it expire. "No," he said. Not loud. Not cruel. Just clear. The word moved through the circle and settled where her request had been. Monica's hand lowered slowly. Derek saw her eyes flick once toward the watching guests, then toward Celeste, then back to him. "Derek," she whispered, but he did not let the softness pull him backward. He had mistaken softness for honesty before. He turned slightly, not to address the crowd like a man seeking applause, but because he wanted his words to belong to the same room where the insult had been placed. "You invited me here to remind me who you thought I was," he said. "Thank you for showing everyone who you really are." Nothing shattered. No one gasped dramatically. The real sound was smaller and sharper than that. A breath caught somewhere near the champagne tower. A glass touched a table too quickly. Preston swallowed and looked away as if the donor wall had suddenly become interesting. Monica stood beneath the chandelier, surrounded by flowers, cameras, sponsors, and all the symbols she had gathered to prove she had risen above him, and for the first time that night, none of it knew how to protect her. Derek did not wait for her answer. He did not need one. Celeste kept her hand lightly on his arm as they turned toward the ballroom entrance. Nathaniel Cross stepped aside with a small nod. Angela Brooks signaled quietly to the staff near the corridor, and the path cleared without spectacle. That was the difference Derek understood now. False power demanded attention. Real power often moved through rooms without raising its voice. As they walked, Derek felt the eyes of the guests follow them. Some looked ashamed. Some looked curious. A few looked disappointed, not in him, but in themselves for laughing too early. He did not count them. He did not need their apology. At the edge of the lobby, Celeste glanced at him. "Are you all right?" she asked. Derek looked back once. Monica had not moved. Preston stood beside her but not close enough to look loyal, his face arranged into something professional and empty. Behind them, the foundation banner still repeated her name in gold letters, but the room no longer seemed to believe the story as easily. "I am," Derek said. And to his own surprise, he meant it. Outside, the night air was cool after the heat of the ballroom. The hotel canopy glowed above the driveway, and 3 black sport utility vehicles waited along the curb, engines quiet, headlights washing the pavement in white. Rain had fallen while they were inside, leaving the street reflective, turning downtown Atlanta into a broken mirror of lights. An attendant opened the rear door of the middle vehicle, but Derek paused before getting in. He looked down the block toward the corner where he had parked 2 hours earlier, thinking of the man who had walked to this hotel alone because someone wanted him to look small. That man was still with him, but he no longer felt like someone to defend. He felt like someone to honor. Celeste stood beside him without rushing him. That was one of the things he loved about her. She understood that dignity sometimes needed a quiet second before it could move forward. Derek reached into his jacket pocket and took out the black general admission card Monica's team had handed him at registration. His name was printed there in plain white letters, without a table number, without honor, without recognition. He looked at it once, then handed it to Angela, who had followed them to the doors. "You can close this out," he said. Angela accepted it with a respectful nod. "Of course, Mr. Hayes." He stepped into the vehicle beside Celeste, and as the door closed, the noise of the hotel softened into distance. Through the tinted window, Derek saw Monica framed in the lobby glass for one brief moment, alone beneath all that golden light. Then the vehicle pulled away from the curb. Derek did not feel victorious in the way people imagine revenge feels. He felt free. The kind of free that comes when a man stops begging the wrong people to understand his value. The city lights slid across the window as Celeste's hand found his, steady and warm. Derek held it and looked forward. Some people will mistake your quiet years for empty years. They will laugh at the work they cannot see, dismiss the sacrifices they benefited from, and call your patience weakness because they never had the discipline to carry it. But time has a way of bringing every hidden thing into the light. And when that moment comes, the strongest answer is not always anger. Sometimes it is walking out with your dignity intact.